It's probably fair to say that the situation in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon in particular, will not be the same at 12 noon in 10 minutes' time when the next news bulletin kicks in as it is now. Fast moving barely comes close. And this, of course, is the worst of all imaginable worlds for people with family there. Professor Ahmed Hankir is... I got a message from him yesterday, actually, describing what situation his family is currently in, describing the attack on central Beirut and how airstrikes had reduced 2 residential blocks to rubble, and the forcible displacement of his parents from Saida in South Lebanon. And I thought it would be opportune, Ahmed, to find out more from you about what life is like for people in the news headlines and in the stories that are unfolding. So, I mean, how are your parents? Are they okay? When did you last speak to them?
I spoke with them last night, but as I mentioned to you, that was before the development that the Israeli military has launched a ground invasion, which is deeply concerning, to say the least.
What are the options or prospects for them? Would you want to get them out? Would it be possible to do so if you did? They're in their 70s, aren't they, your parents?
My father is in his 70s, yes, and he has health and mobility issues. I mean, I want to get them out, and I went to Beirut last month, and I was hoping that I would be able to persuade them, but Lebanon is home, and they are understandably attached to Lebanon. They have family there, they have friends there, but we are fortunate, we are blessed. They are in a relatively safe part of Beirut. They were forcibly displaced from Saida, Sidon, but there have been some more attacks, not only in Dahia, which is the suburb of Beirut, but in central Beirut, in Kola, which is a busy interchange. So that makes me feel like nowhere in Beirut is safe, really. They're targeting Christian majority areas, they being the Israeli military. They are targeting beach resorts. They are targeting the roads to the international airport. It doesn't feel like anywhere is safe, James.
I mean, the figures, again, have no doubt been overtaken by events, but more than 700 people dead, including 50 children, and that was late on the 29th of September. Tens of thousands of people crossing the border from Lebanon into Syria. And I mean, you know more about the history of the region than I do, Ahmed, but this has happened at least twice before in your father's living memory, if not in ours. What is the likelihood of something going differently this time?
Well, I mean, if previous Israeli invasions are anything to go by, then I have a foreboding that there will be another Gaza in Lebanon, to quote the United Nations Secretary General. So I don't think things will be any different. I mean, in a rather bellicose and aggressive speech to the UN General Assembly, not once did Netanyahu mention ceasefire. And he also made this ludicrous, unfounded statement that every household in Lebanon has a missile, every kitchen has a bomb, thus legitimizing his attack on the civilian population and dehumanizing us as well. So I don't feel very optimistic, if I'm honest with you, James.
And of course, I mean, Hezbollah continues to send missiles into Israel.
That is deplorable indeed, but we have to be mindful of the facts. 82% of the exchange in fire between Hezbollah and the Israeli military is from the Israeli military. So that's a fact, you're right. Hezbollah are launching missiles, and I condemn that in the strongest possible terms, but I also condemn what the Israeli military are doing.
Can you tell us a little bit about Lebanon as a country? Because there's a danger of conflating it with Gaza, which is essentially the world's largest refugee camp. Lebanon is a nascent democracy, albeit one that is in many ways in thrall to the Hezbollah movement, and its close associations with President Assad in Syria and Iran are well documented. But as a place to live, what is it like?
Well, there's a reason why the New York Times rated Beirut the number one travel destination worldwide for its nightlife, for its hospitality. Lebanese people, we love life, James. We love life. You know, we are friendly, perhaps too friendly, educated. Many of us speak multiple languages. I know it's a trope, but in the past it was the Paris of the Middle East, right? You can go swimming and you can go skiing on the same day, and it's a beautiful place. We have delicious food. I would argue the tastiest food in the world. But there's so much more to us than how we are being portrayed.
And that portrayal is designed to muster support for the continuing.
Oh, absolutely.
attacks.
Very much so. These negative caricatures and tropes, and I think they dehumanize us. So, yes, I think these portrayals are being used to justify the attacks in Lebanon.
Your parents are British Lebanese.
They are indeed, yes, British passport holders, yes.
What's the connection there? Where does the British half come from?
So my father migrated from Beirut to Belfast in the 80s.
Blimey, out of the frying pan.
Well, that's what my mother says. My mother says it was like jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. So this was during the Troubles. And actually, she said there wasn't much of a difference between Beirut and Belfast at the time.
Grief.
And so he used to work there as an obstetrician, and then that's where I was born.
Right.
A day after the leader of the Phalange, Kataib, Gemayel, was assassinated, and following that were the Sabra and Shatila massacres. But the connection to the UK is that my father used to work in the NHS for 16 years. He gets very nostalgic. And he is, as I said, he's a British passport holder.
And retired back to Beirut.
He did, yes.
Back to
Lebanon,
me,
yes.
not
My father used to provide care. We don't have universal health care in Lebanon.
I won't ask you about physician associates on this visit to the studio.
It's not foremost on my mind at the moment.
I'm pretty sure
James.
it's not foremost on your mind.
No.
But I mean, you must just be worried. The stuff that you're currently worried about is obvious. Is there a point at which Mum and Dad will say, yeah, actually, we would quite like to leave? And do you worry that by then it might be impossible to actually get them out?
Well, that's what I'm worried about.
Right.
And I think part of me, because I live between London, Ontario in Canada and London, UK, and I travelled last week, and I think part of me is hoping that because my siblings are here, we can have a video call with them and we can collectively persuade them. But as I said, Lebanon is home. But we are extremely fortunate because they are in a relatively safe part of Beirut, and they have that option as British nationals to leave. And that's not something that we can take for granted. But I mean, that's something that they will consider if the situation continues to escalate.
And have you had any contact with the Foreign Office? Would you need contact with the Foreign Office? Would you need help?
I think they would need. My sister was in Lebanon during the 2006 Lebanon-Israel war, and she was evacuated by the British government, and she was in close communication, and she was actually evacuated by sea because there were no commercial flights available.
And finally, if I may, you've written very powerfully about mental health, about your own about mental health. You're a consultant psychiatrist.
I am, yes.
We should add. So you have experience of both sides of the consulting room door. This must take a toll on you. I mean, are you looking after yourself?
I'm trying to. Thank you so much for asking, James, because I do embrace my vulnerability and I'm honest, open and transparent about my mental health experiences.
You've written a book called Breakthrough, which addresses all of the issues.
I did reach breaking point in the 2006 Lebanon war.
Right.
So this is very triggering for me because it does trigger the resurfacing of traumatic memories. And I'm mindful of that. And I utilize tools to contribute to my resilience and recovery. I mean, this morning I went for a 15-kilometer run. I know that if I don't do that, that increases my vulnerability. But I appreciate that social connectivity, creativity, physical activity, all of these tools contribute to my mental health resilience. Otherwise, I think that I would be in a darker place right now.
Well, I'm glad it's working, and long may it continue to do so. Actually, a quick word on the psychology of your mum and dad, because you can say it's home, but it's not safe. I mean, it's safer than other parts of Lebanon. I mean, are they a stubborn pair, or is it a form of patriotism? How do you rationalise this reluctance or refusal to do what you and your siblings are desperate for them to do?
Looking at it through the lens of a psychiatrist?
Yes, or a son, or both.
Or a son, or both. The mind mounts defense mechanisms, psychological defense mechanisms.
How interesting.
I think they're in denial, if I'm entirely honest.
Of the level of danger?
Yeah, I think so. And they don't want me to worry.
Which makes it easier to cope with, even as it exacerbates the exposure.
It's an immature coping mechanism. So element of denial. They don't want me to get too worried or too concerned. Credit to my mother. I think she's coping a lot better with this than I am. But you don't have to be at the epicenter, James. You don't have to be in Lebanon to be suffering. Many people outside of Lebanon are traumatized. We are devastated. We are in shock. There's a range of emotions. There's anger. Look what happened when the British journalists went to Ain al-Dilla bin Saida, when the Israeli military, they bombed 2 buildings literally next to my uncle's. And my uncle was terrified that he would be killed with his family. And when the local residents discovered that the journalist is British, they expressed anger towards her. Why? Because they vocalized that Britain is complicit with the Israeli military because they are supporting them militarily, for example.
So I sense you don't have much optimism about diplomatic efforts from London or Washington.
Well, I don't know about London or Washington. I mean, certainly the foreign minister of Spain, because we know that Spain commands the UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Forces in Lebanon. He issued a clarion call that the only way that we can achieve peace is by respecting international humanitarian law. I mean, is it superfluous to say that I'm not optimistic that the Israeli military will respect international humanitarian law? And there needs to be a ceasefire. The hostages need to be released, the Israeli hostages and the Palestinian hostages. And not only a ceasefire in Lebanon, there needs to be a ceasefire in Gaza as well. I will vocalize that, James.
Of course. And if only more would. Professor Ahmed Hankir, thank you. Should I mention your book? Would you mind?
Yeah, of course. No, by all means. Of course, I'm very proud of it.
A story of hope, resilience and mental health recovery as well, which will provide historical and health-based perspective on some of the stuff that we have talked about. And as I mentioned, Ahmed is a consultant psychiatrist currently dividing his time between London, UK and London, Canada. I will remember of all of this conversation, but the idea of an obstetrician making his way from Beirut to Belfast at the height of the Troubles will never leave me.
There's more to say about that.
I'm sure that